Oh, on the phone, I can't get the gallery. Is there a way to do that?
You have to press the little X on your box, the plus sign, press the plus sign on the box with your
I
picture.
don't have a date yet.
And it'll open everybody's.
No, they're just having a meeting.
Thank you. Sorry.
Did you get that, Paul?
Yeah, but I don't have a plus sign here. I don't see one.
Do you see a box with just your picture? Or
Yes.
do you see a box with me talking? And
Yep.
it has a plus and a minus sign on each corner?
No, mine doesn't have that.
Okay, we are live, guys.
All right, that's all right. Let's just deal with it the way it is.
Okay,
All right.
with that, I'm going to call the meeting to order. It's the time of, look at that, 6:37. Welcome. I'll go through the agenda real quick. Our first roll call. So Rhonda, do you have a list of everybody? Can you put that
Oh.
list?
Hold on one second, guys. I have a. I do, but I've got some feedback for,
Everybody putting themselves on mute, and if you want to speak, please turn on your mic or just raise
okay.
your hand saying you're going to speak. Or on the, if you're putting up the participants, you'll be able to see everybody on the list, and at that point, you can, at the bottom, you can raise your hand. Everybody see that?
Are you asking us to mute?
Yes.
Jim? Okay.
Yes, I can't find that. I thought I closed it. I X'd it. Okay, I'll go back to it.
So is everybody staying in because it's nice and dry and cool?
Yeah, the air conditioner works.
Okay, let me get it back big. See,
Within reason, it's I'm inside
Why
because the
can't I
kids are
make it
outside,
big
but I don't
again?
have AC, so
like I can't
Oh, that's not good.
little
able to sign up.
breeze.
I'm out here building the bridge,
Yes,
Jim.
right here,
The
maybe.
new bridge over to
There it goes.
Tonawanda.
I got it. So,
You better get moving because we need to get off pretty soon here.
Yeah.
You have a 40-minute limitation on this as well?
No, we had to, no, this is an unbridled guy that allows us more time than we want and allows us 100 people.
okay, Jim, you can go ahead. There may be some feedback on my end.
Oh, that may be because of the logging out to the other site? Yes. Okay, with that, I'll let roll call. Rhonda, you put the list off the screen,
Yep.
right?
Are you ready? Do you want me to do a call or do you want me to just?
Pick it off the list you have on the side. With that, I'm going to get right into the Lrp, and then we'll follow the agenda from there. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Justin and Wendy.
There you go. Had to remember to unmute myself. Thank you, Jim. So I guess first off, did everybody get a copy of the agenda and all the documents that I sent along?
Yes.
Okay. Good. If you're thumbs up or nod your head or so far we're good. We're good. We're good. Okay, cool. I could share my screen if that makes it easier, but otherwise we'll probably just make it easier and just we'll just kind of work off of that. So if my eyes kind of like shift back and forth, you know, that's I'm looking at a split screen. But what we're going to be working on here tonight is at least hopefully wrapping up the rest of the policy section. For those of you who are at the last meeting, we took a look at the first half of the policy section, 1 to about 18, made some various comments on updating the policy explanations, tried to kind of do a little bit more detail and some more specific aspects that are related to Grand Island as far as the policies go. So with that, I want to jump into it and work on policies 19 through 44. Hopefully we can finish those up, and then we'll move on to some preliminary draft, at least, that we put together as far as projects and so on and so forth. So I guess with that, does anybody have any first off questions as far as the policies go? Refresher that if anyone needs a reminder of what they entail and everything else like that, or do we want to just jump right into it?
Jump right into them.
All right. Sounds good. All right. So then on the document of all the policies that I sent to everybody, which the document of that one was GI Lrpc policy summary updated 1. We scroll down to, and I did put hopefully a nice big bright title bar that everyone saw that policy 19 is where our discussion would be starting. Again, the policy statements, we can't change those. So those have to stay as is. But what we're doing is we're adding in some additional detail or modifying the policy explanation that's given to us by Department of State to kind of, again, detail a little bit more to Grand Island specifically. So with policy 19, that's the first of the public access policy. That one is protect, maintain, and increase the level and types of access to public water, related recreation resources and facilities. So what I did is I took the existing policy explanation, and everyone can see in my write-up at least, I added a little bit more, some other modifications, removed some text. Everything that's new is in italics, existing text is in plain. So I took out any of the reference to urban areas because obviously that doesn't apply to Grand Island. And I added in some additional notice there as far as access, recreational trails, public parks, dedicated wildlife areas, in addition to what they already have noted there as far as beaches, boating facilities and such. Put a tie-in as far as in conjunction with the town's comprehensive plan to kind of marry those two together. And looking at encouraging mixed use in and around the areas of Whitehaven and Ferry Village, because those are the only two like big areas that really there's any mass that's available within the WRA for that mixed use type of development. So I added those in, and then let's see what else I add. And then I also add in there as far as adding in an additional guideline component, access shall connect greatest extent feasible to existing trails, recreational areas, or waterfront facilities to, again, just kind of spur on if we do put in any new trails that they would connect to existing ones. And then I removed the guideline 4 as far as public transportation, because within the WRA, there is no public transportation areas that are really in there. With that, any comments, thoughts, suggestions?
Justin?
Yes.
I think I'd prefer to see on the screen the policies as we're talking about them, but I don't know about everybody else.
That's easier than let's do that.
I
What do
agree.
others think?
My only other thought is, Diane, it looks like in the other document, you put some comments in.
Mhm.
Working out of the one that we're working in now, Justin, we can't see the comments that Diane made in the other document. So I don't know if there's a way to address both of those without us toggling back and forth to look at them.
Yeah, I can bring those up too. Diane had a lot of good points The only thing though was that they were specific, they seem to be more geared towards potential project
Yeah.
comments, less so as far as policy stuff goes. Because
That's,
again, the policies more have to look to existing regulations that are in place either at the federal, the state, or the local level that are being implemented. It's not the place to put in like specific projects or, you know, things that could be carried out. So a lot of what Diane had in there is good stuff. I mean, I'm not discounting that, but I think those are ones that we would bring into the project section then too.
Justin, thank you, because that's the reason I phoned you.
Gotcha.
And so, okay, thanks, Martha, too, for bringing that up.
Could I just ask one question, just because I missed like the first half? So what you're saying, so I've got a separate computer, so I'm looking at everything, plus you can see me and I can see you. So
Mhm.
you're talking like Diane added an edit about Spicer Creek, which was specific to policy 19.
Yeah. So
Yeah, okay. You don't have to explain. I just want to make sure I'm toggling between everything and understand. Because I'm sure it's not the only one.
Yes.
So then I can follow along.
yes, definitely, definitely.
Okay.
So back to Diane's point then, would it be easier then for me to share my screen so we can see the policy then for everybody? That'd be all right?
I
Okay.
would prefer
Problem,
that.
the
Yeah.
problem I have is I'm on a phone and I can't read that probably. My
Yeah,
screen's real small.
yeah. I mean, so, but you do have a hard copy of it or something else that you can refer to though, Paul?
I've got it on the monitor right behind me with the general policies that you said. Yeah,
Okay, all right, so,
but I don't have Diane's stuff though. I
gotcha,
haven't
yeah,
seen
and,
Diane's comments.
yeah,
I
and,
don't know if anybody else has Diane's stuff except you.
No,
well,
I
yeah.
do, because it came in the email. So was that the email that came? He included it. And when I open up the policies and procedures, it has the sections on the page number of where somebody decided maybe they would add more specificity to the actual policy in a sense. So
Yeah.
if you open up the email that he sent, you'd see it.
yeah, so what
Well, I
Diane
opened
did
up the
is,
email. I've got the 4 of them listed there. You know, the agenda, you have the policies, and then you have the project stuff and so on. I'm in the policy thing right now. I'm not seeing any of that.
Page
Um,
24.
Diane
Page
added,
24 of policy 19.
I'm
Yeah.
on page 24, policy 19.
so
Yep, and
underneath,
it says policy Spicer Creek, Scenic Woods, Bicentennial Park, West River are examples. And it says Diane Evans 2 days ago.
yeah, so that's under the Dropbox site itself, there's an area off
Yeah.
to the right that has an option for commenting on the document. That's what Diane did, is she made direct comments in the Dropbox document link. So that's,
Okay, well, whatever they are, I'm not seeing them. So,
Okay.
Well,
That's all
Paul,
right.
I wouldn't worry about them because as Justin said, most of them are project oriented. They're not
Right.
actually changing wording of the policy.
yeah, and I can take all of Diane's comments, compile them and send them out to everyone, just so at least you can see what it was that she had commented on afterwards. Okay.
Okay.
So with that, then I'll have to ask Rhonda, I will need you to pass the host duties to me, so then I can share my screen. There we go. Thank you. Okay, so let me share screen. Let me get the right one here. Policy summary. I'm not gonna share sound. Okay, so I got a lot of different things open here. So let me just bring it here. All right, so everyone can see my screen then, correct?
Yes.
Yeah,
Okay, perfect. All right. There we go. All right, so this is policy 19. And as I mentioned, I added and removed some stuff in there. So if anybody has any other comments, thoughts, suggestions on it, let me know and we can tweak it as needed.
I'm speaking for Joe Mancaluso.
Mhm.
I'm speaking for June Crawford. Is there any chance we could get a printout copy of this sent to us? I mean, there's 56 pages if you want to print it out on the computer.
Joe, it's on the website with Rhonda, so Rhonda can actually point it to. It's on the website itself, so that the LWRP currently and the policies are there. And then June has access to the Dropbox, and I'll get you that as well. But do you want a hard copy of it?
Yeah, let me tell you why, Jeff, because she tried printing it out and she couldn't get the download to go through.
Got it.
And I tried it on mine and I could get half of it on mine to go through. I don't know what the problem is with it. It's probably me, but I couldn't get all of it and June couldn't get any of it. So I asked her, I'd bring it up to see if this topic could be printed out and sent copies to the members.
Okay, June, or I mean, Justin, this is the copy, right?
Yeah, that's the original yeah, that's all the original state policies. Yes.
Okay, Joe, I have copies. I'll get it to you.
Okay, thank you.
I don't need a copy. I'm fine.
Okay, good.
Copy of what? The copy of the commented part, or they're just the general policies?
The
General policies.
Yeah, I've got those. I've got 6 copies of them here. I could share some actually.
Yeah, I'll get you
Yeah,
some.
I don't need anything either, anything printed. I'm all set.
Okay.
Perfect. Okay.
Thank you.
So,
Not a problem.
Justin, maybe you could make this easiest on the policies. If you've modified the language of it, tell us why.
Good idea.
So what we did, or what I did, is the reason why I modified some of this policy, the policy explanation, as I mentioned, is because there was some text in there that dealt with urban coastal areas, which obviously doesn't apply to Grand Island. So I removed the reference to that. And again, I added in some more detail as far as access of what the town's looking for, expanding beyond beaches, boating facilities, fishing areas to include trails, parks, wildlife areas, because obviously that those types of amenities and waterfront access components are found within the WRA. Added that in, made note of the mixed use areas that would be primarily at Whitehaven and Ferry Village, because again, that's where the landmass area is for mixed use. And then the last little bit is add the following under guideline number 2, which is any proposed project to increase public access to public water-related recreation resources and facilities shall be analyzed according to the following factors. And one of the factors that I put in was access shall connect to the greatest extent feasible to existing trails, recreational areas, or waterfront facilities through physical or informational means.
Got it.
Right. Okay.
Justin, I think to make this easier, because the 44 state policies themselves are very cumbersome. And if we just focus on the policy statement, and then as you're doing, just talk about what you thought the enhancements were. And I think it would be helpful if the committee could just, like going back to the policy statement for 19. It's protect, maintain, and increase the level and types of access to water-related recreational resources and facilities.
Mhm.
So for the committee, what we want is for you to think about, where are those areas? We've already kind of talked about them, but what areas should be mentioned? Justin took it upon himself to point out that we need more emphasis in Ferry Village and in the Whitehaven area. Are there other places where we want to see public access, the level and types of access, or how existing access is maintained? Are there other areas where we want to see that happen beyond Whitehaven and Ferry Village?
Well, we've talked about wanting it along East River, wanting a passive recreational launch,
Right,
correct?
right. Yes.
So
East,
that's,
yes, East River. Yes, absolutely.
okay.
Absolutely.
So would that be something like, when you talk about Whitehaven, would that include Bicentennial Park in that section there? Is that part of that
Yes.
component?
Sure, you know, and
be,
anywhere
yeah.
in that section. Yeah, but we kind of glom all that together in Whitehaven. Yep.
Yeah, so that would be the good spot to put the non-motorized boat launch, you know, passive recreation boats, right, boat launch. So like kayaks, you know, car top boats, stuff like that.
At Bicentennial Park.
Yeah, but I would be at the Bicentennial Park, and Jim knows about this, we talked about it this
Yeah.
morning, would be, there's an 85-foot waterfront section there, right off of Bicentennial Park, that's directly across the street from where Scenic Woods is. So it'd be like an interconnection there. You'd have a water access
Yeah.
out onto the water, or people coming from the water to access the park, Bicentennial Park itself, through that launch. You know where I'm talking about, right?
Yes.
Yep.
Huh?
Right at the base of Ransom,
Yeah.
Okay.
right at
Yeah.
Ransom.
It's south of Ransom.
south of Ransom. Just up.
Yeah. Well, it's between Ransom and Whitehaven, but it's actually, if you know where there's a place called the Dorigo Park property. It's right next to right near that. But if you look at the Scenic Woods master plan, you'll see that there's a small segment of waterfront there. That's the piece I'm talking about.
Okay.
And could I just ask a question too? I know I'm a little late to the game, but I know back we were talking about next to the new Radisson, or the change in hands of the Holiday Inn to Radisson, that also had public access for more of a motorized boat public launch.
Yeah, but we hadn't known that yet. We're trying to negotiate with the Radisson to buy the old ferry landing, which is just south of the hotel.
Okay.
That parcel, they would like to sell it, and the DEC is willing to participate with us to do that. But we've been trying to clear up the title, so we don't actually own it.
Oh, okay.
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 Anything else come to mind for policy 19? Going once,
I'd
going
say,
twice.
I'd say silence is good for now.
Yeah.
Right. So
Policy 20.
what's the intent of 20?
So
All right.
this one is access to the publicly owned, silence your cell phones. This is access to the publicly owned foreshore and to lands immediately adjacent to the foreshore or the water's edge that are publicly owned shall be provided, and it shall be provided in a manner compatible with adjoining uses. This ties in with the previous policy. So again, but it's focusing right on the shoreline where we want to have access for public use. So this could be additional kayak launches, that type of stuff. Justin had pointed out that the existing policy explanation that the state has provided for policy 20 is sufficient. It includes a lot of areas that are acceptable. We don't really need to tweak or change language, especially because we're going to have good coverage under policy 19, which ties in with this one. So there's some redundancy. So with that said, if we can move to 21.
Yep. So I was just
21
Can I-
is, yep, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, Wendy, can I just ask, can you give me a quick example of what provided in a manner compatible with adjoining uses means? Like, is that the adjoining property owners, their uses?
Yes.
What does that
yes.
mean?
So you don't want to put something in that will create parking problems or a gathering place that might create a lot of noise that could disrupt surrounding uses. So, it's about community character and compatibility. You definitely want to have access to foreshore, but you want to make sure that it's done in a manner that's not going to be disruptive to the uses that are around it.
Yeah.
And
So
I
you
think-
don't want, you don't
I
want,
think
you
for
don't-
Grand Island, that's probably important because you have a lot of residential uses along the waterfront, especially on the east side of the island and the southern area in some parts too. So,
yeah.
yep. Okay,
So you wouldn't want to put a marine launch next to a bunch of homes,
right.
you know, because you're not going to want to have that kind of traffic, that kind of noise.
Unless you have property sufficient where you could buffer it and such. So.
Yes.
But our
That's
current
what that
zoning,
is about.
excuse me, our current zoning takes care of that though, right?
Yes.
Yes.
So, okay,
So yeah, so it goes in line with that too. So it's just making sure that all the different, you know, pieces of the puzzle all line up.
Right. Okay.
So then under
Okay.
policy 21.
21, yeah. This is water dependent and water enhanced recreation will be encouraged and facilitated and will be given priority over non-water related uses along the coast. So what this is really saying is that in areas where we have opportunity for the development of water dependent or water enhanced recreational uses, and that means water dependent is a use that must be located on the water to function. So a
Mhm.
boat launch. You know, if you don't have water, you can't have a boat launch. Water enhanced recreation is a park where you can do scenic viewing and birding and things like that. So, so you want to encourage and facilitate this and give priority where you can to the development of these uses over non-water, you know, residential uses or other things. So where do we have public lands? Where can they be improved with water dependent and water enhanced recreation? So in many ways, policy 21 ties back in. There's redundancy again here. It's tying back in with policy 20 and policy 19.
Mhm.
So in this case, what did you have, Justin? You have that one thing, and this is important because we've talked about it a lot, is making sure that there's some discussion about ecotourism and water-related recreation. Ecotourism includes, you know, again, what I was saying, making sure that you have places, benches, or places where people can sit and view or watch birds or
Mhm.
launch their kayak or those types of things. So I think we've got that covered. So we'll go through this policy explanation and tailor it where necessary. But for the most part, the policy explanation for 21 is sufficient.
Yeah. The only other thing that I did take off of there was the last bit here as far as water related off-road recreational vehicle use is an acceptable activity.
Yeah, that goes bye-bye.
Yeah, because that's something like, you know, on the shores of Cape Cod, you know, you would
Sure,
find
of
that
course.
where
Or
RVs.
places on Long Island or
Yeah.
Daytona Beach, right?
So
Yep.
something like that doesn't apply to Grand Island, so I just pulled that portion out.
Okay. Policy 22 is development when located adjacent to the shore will provide water-related recreation whenever such use is compatible with reasonably anticipated demand for such activities and is compatible with the primary purpose of the development. So what this is saying is, if the land's next, if you had an area, perhaps in a place in Ferry Village, where lands were going to be redeveloped, because you don't have a lot of open land along the Grand Island shoreline that would enable you to build a big development. And if you could, that development would have to have, as a part of its design, water-related recreation. But in this case, you don't really have that. So there may be places where it could happen, but it would have to happen in the form of redevelopment, whether that would be the Radisson property or someplace in Ferry Village. And so in that case, this policy outlines things that you would want to consider. I'm sorry. There's a squirrel outside and someone's competing with me for attention. I'm sorry. So in this case, it outlines, the policy outlines things that you want to consider that could be water-related uses that should be part of the design, whether it's parks, or they're outlining, I'm sorry, I take that back. They're outlining uses that could occur, whereas a multiple use, you might want to include water-related recreation. So they say parks, highways, such as in the case of Grand Island, that could be the West Side Highway, power plants, which you don't have, utility transmission rights of way, maybe, sewage treatment plants, maybe, mental health facilities, hospitals, prisons, schools, universities, military facilities, you don't have any of those. Nature preserves, yes. Large residential subdivisions, I don't think that that's going to happen anywhere on your shoreline. Shopping centers and office buildings. So we'll go through and we'll cull this list and we'll make it applicable to Grand Island. But aside from that, there's not a lot that otherwise needs to change in this policy explanation. So does anybody have any questions about that one?
So that'd be sort of like Fisherman's Landing.
Fisherman's Landing.
Yeah, by the,
Yeah.
there's a sewage
Yeah.
pump station there. Yeah,
Yes,
By the
yes, yes.
by the South Grand Island Bridge. But
Yep,
there's another,
exactly.
there's also another site at, I think where Harvey Road comes on to the East River, right in that general area.
Yeah,
And we've had, when I was in the Corps of Engineers, we had a lot of disputes between the docks that are adjacent to that thing. And I think at one time the fire department was parking one of their fire boats there too, as well. And that could be opened up to public access, but it might create a lot of controversy because it's in the middle of a residential area.
Mhm.
So I just have one really quick question.
Yep.
We're in the middle of economic development is in the middle of doing a market analysis or trying, we have a grant and we're at the very early stages of it. But is a market analysis something that becomes part of this or could be a supportive document or?
Well, if you're going to do a market analysis, if it were going to consider properties along the waterfront that could be, that have potential for redevelopment along these lines.
If something like that was found in the market analysis.
Yeah, then we could add it into here, yes.
Okay.
Yep.
That's all.
Yep. Yep.
and you know what else? There's one other spot. I do a lot of bike riding around the island, weather permitting this year. But there seems to be a eruption of trouble, I would call it, because our competition, where the first exit onto the island from the North Bridge comes into play in that parking area. And a lot of times the border patrol over in there where the bike path connects. And I find more and more vehicles parked there and getting off and walking. And I'm wondering about that area and how that, because there's a lot of people, and I actually have literally seen, well, and I'm gossiping, right? This is third party, but I've seen it. You know, the border patrol get really upset with the people parking there. I've seen the sheriffs come and pull people over on West River. Have no idea why. I'm just riding my bike, but it seems like there's a lot of trouble down in that corner. And I don't know, is that another pumping station?
Yeah, that's
Something like
the
near-
one that provides water over to Niagara County. But that's called Eagle Overlook, by the way.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
And by the way, I've seen Border Patrol guys in there sleeping in their vehicles there too.
Yeah, I think I know why they're upset because everybody's parking there now.
Right.
West River is becoming a good thing.
What I think people don't know is that there's actually two parking lots there. There's the one that's right next to the parkway, and if you go behind the pumping station to the north, there's another parking area there too.
I think I think in the case of Eagle Overlook, it would apply to one of the former public access policies. You know, perhaps this is a place where we need to sort out uses or improve how the area is used. So maybe that falls under policy 19 in terms of protecting, maintaining, and increasing the level and types of access. So, but it's definitely
That does.
something that needs to be discussed somewhere in here, but I would put it under policy 19.
And that, as you know, everybody knows that facility belongs to New York State Parks.
Yes, it
Yeah.
is also the kayak launch site too for the river.
Yeah. Mhm.
So Wendy, on this policy specifically on a redevelopment, like Radisson at some point will probably be redeveloped again, imaginably in our span. So
Yeah.
does this force the new property owner or whoever it would be to create water access, whether they want to or
Yes.
not?
Yes.
So do they have to create it for the public or for themselves? It's private property, right?
Yes, but they should have some water-related public access so that people can, whether, even if all they put in is a boardwalk or a pathway that goes along the waterfront, so people can walk along the shore or bike along the shore, connecting it up with something else. But yes, they need to include a water-related recreation feature.
So that becomes code then, or is that suggested? Is that required
It's
by doing this?
policy. It's
Policy.
policy.
It
But-
could become
It
code.
could become
know,
code.
Yeah.
It's up to the town.
Depends on who buys it, right, and what we're looking at that time.
Right,
And
and
this-
then,
yeah.
and so what it would do is it would come down to site plan approval. If something happens there and it has to go through the site plan approval process, then that's something that, the planning board would work to make sure that the policies of the LWRP are being implemented in the design.
Yeah. So as
So this is commercial and private, like residential zoned land, or is this only, does this apply to any, if you put your house on the
It's
water?
really gonna apply to larger commercial developments or large subdivision developments, but I don't know if there's any areas in the WRA where you're gonna get large subdivisions of 50 units or more. In this case, but it really would apply to commercial properties, so that if they do redevelop, they have to include some kind of water related feature.
So if someone on East River, my concern is if someone on East River and their residents decides to do a renovation out on the water area, they don't have, that does not include them. This doesn't encumber them.
No, this is not gonna, you can't apply this to individual residential properties.
All right, thank you for that.
Oh, sure.
Martha,
So
did you have a?
Yeah, I raised my hand on purpose.
Okay.
So I'm wondering if this is a policy then, once everything's all adopted and formalized, does it fall under the planning board to be responsible for knowing what's in here? If there was a changeover, for example, with the hotel, like the
Well,
point that Eric was just bringing up, like how does that all get
Yes.
connected?
At such time that we're wrapping up this LWRP, when we get into section 5, we're going to talk about coastal consistency review. And the town will be required, and I don't remember if you already adopted the law, but even if you did, we'll have to update it. But the town has to have a coastal consistency review law. And what that means is the law will require that any actions, and it explains the types of actions and what things might be exempt, but that there are actions that would be proposed within the waterfront revitalization area that have to be reviewed for consistency with these LWRP policies.
Mhm.
And the town's going to have to designate somebody to do that, to be the gatekeeper. And whether that's the building department or, whoever brings in applications for development. If I come in and I want to develop, I buy the Radisson and I want to redevelop the property. I come in for the applications that I need to fill out to start that process and get me in the pipeline for site plan review and whatever is required. I'm going to be given a waterfront assessment form. And I'm going to have to fill that form out and turn it in along with my site plan application and my seeker forms and whatever else the town requires. And somebody's going to have to review that, whether it's assigned to the planning board or the code enforcement office, but somebody has to review it in accordance with the LWRP policies to make sure that whatever is being proposed complies with the policies, including how it's being designed. So in the case of the Radisson, the design would have to include features that would comply with policy 22. So things will get caught, and if necessary, they'll come to the planning board. So the other thing you asked is, does the planning board have to know about this LWRP? Yeah, they should use this LWRP the same way they should be using the town's comprehensive plan, and making sure that new development or redevelopment complies with the recommendations and goals and policies of the comprehensive plan, as well as the policies and recommendations of this LWRP.
Yeah, this is just one more tool in the town's toolbox in order to get basically the development that you guys want to see. But this is just geared more towards the waterfront, that you've got all this great waterfront around the town. This gives you basically the rationale to say, okay, well, we want to have more access to the waterfront, and you can fall back on this, say, and this is the reason why.
Right.
Yep.
There's another external factor here, and that's the regulatory agencies that are going to be reviewing projects that are in the town of Grand Island on the waterfront.
Yes,
And
that too.
they will require this information, and so if it's either going to have to come from the Department of State, but if you have an approved coastal zone management plan, then it's incumbent upon the town to provide the necessary response there for that to determine that it's consistent with the LWRP plan.
Right. Yep. Yes.
That would be the DEC and the Corps of Engineers
and state parks.
And state
Uh,
parks.
So when
Yeah,
state
state parks
parks
to some
continues to
extent, yeah.
plan improvements, and
Mhm.
we've got some in our list of proposed projects. When in the future, when they are undertaking projects, those projects have to be reviewed for consistency with this LWRP. Yes, absolutely. That was a good catch, Paul.
Currently, the catch on that is the town engineering department is where these requests are going to, and they have been coming in. I've been reviewing them. I had been reviewing them when they came in with the engineering department, determined if they go to the planning board because they could be part of a proposal. Most of the time when they came in for request and review, it was because somebody was putting in a very large dock. And when they everybody came forward and says, is this consistent with the LWRP? So that is the linkage we have within the town currently. That doesn't mean it stays that way, but that's what the linkage is current.
Right. And so, just to take it up to a higher level here, this is one of the reasons, or one of the advantages of having an LWRP. Because right now, for those bigger projects, whether it's a core project or a DEC project or whatever, those agencies are just looking at the state's coastal management program and making sure that they're complying with that. And there's nothing that requires them to take a look at the local level. So now the town is establishing local policy that these agencies are now going to have to comply with.
Right. Exactly.
So, yep.
It takes the state program and basically localizes it and tailors it to the town.
Right.
So I think, as
Right.
Jim had mentioned before, now the town has more of a seat at the table when it comes to development projects and such.
Right. Yep.
Can I just ask one question? As we get so detailed as to, being whatever time it is that we're looking at, what we'd like to develop or what we ask of somebody, how much then ability do we have once we've decided to go this way and have this put on Grand Island for them to maintain it?
You mean a project in general that's undertaken by a state agency? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, just to make sure that it's always maintained and put in place once it's put in place.
Well, the town doesn't, aside from them coming in and making sure that their projects are consistent with LWRP policy, it's really up to them to make sure that they're maintaining their own properties. The town doesn't have much leverage.
Right.
It's not like the town is issuing site plan approval where it can condition that to say, well, you have to keep maintaining it, and if trees die, you have to replace them and things like that. Don't have a lot of leverage with the state agency in that regard. but you would
Right.
just hope that they would take care of their own stuff.
Yeah, but it's
Wendy-
just
Wendy-
something to consider, you know what I mean? Because before
Yeah.
we would get too harsh, right?
Right.
Well, Wendy, you should consider this, that if the activity is in waters of the United States, regulated by the DEC or the Corps of Engineers, there is a standard permit that condition in their permits that requires them to maintain and care for the property or remove it if they're not using it anymore.
Oh,
But
well,
that only applies to the piece that's in the water. Doesn't now,
right,
if
to
there's
the
a
piece,
house,
yes, right, yeah,
if there's a
Mhm.
house
Right.
on upland property that's falling apart, that's another matter.
right.
Yeah.
Or if the park, if state parks isn't maintaining picnic shelters or benches or things like that, you don't have,
Right.
there's not much you can do, you know. I mean, call up Mark Mistretta and complain, but I don't know what else you can do, so with that being said, to keep us moving.
Yeah.
If there aren't any other questions, we can keep moving on to policies 23 and 24. And these are the historic and scenic, actually 25 as well, the historic and scenic resources policies. The first one is pretty simple. It applies to state designated features. So it's protect, enhance, and restore structures, districts, areas, or sites that are of significance in the history, architecture, archaeology, and culture of the state, its communities, or the nation. So here we would highlight some of the local landmarks and things, but it really applies to state features. So there's not a lot that we can say. However, in this particular case, policy 24 gives us that opportunity. Wait a
So that's
minute.
what we're talking
I'm
about.
getting, wait a minute. I'm sorry. Sorry. So in 23, yes, in 23, we would have to, because it says it's communities, we would highlight things that are of local significance, like I forgot the name of the feature that's over on the west side near Beaver Island State Park, that lovely little, is it a boathouse structure, whatever?
Yeah, the Spalding Boathouse on private property.
Yes, but we would
Yeah.
highlight that, and we would highlight the state parks and any
well,
other
the,
things that we identify of historic significance.
Yeah, like the range light at the Buffalo Launch Club, that kind of thing.
Yep,
Yeah, and
Yes.
we've got a number of those assets and features actually noted on one of the maps too.
Yeah.
So
okay, so that type of stuff you would recognize it here as something that you want to make sure that it is recognized and protected, enhanced, and restored where necessary. If there's any areas where we decide that you want to designate a district of historic significance, we would note that here so that it supports projects.
Mhm.
Okay.
So
Right here.
as Justin said, the existing policy explanation is sufficient as is. The key point in this policy with respect to Grand Island is the local landmark park or locally designated historic district, which is located within the WRA boundary. So
one
so
of the
we-
points that I made here, as far as looking into the proposed project section at least, would lead to possibly the formation of an actual certified local government, which is recognized by the State Parks Department as being a local organization that handles local historic districts and sites, and that would be able to give that formal listing for those buildings and sites, which would then give more emphasis to this policy then as well.
yes,
Jim,
Yep.
you were
Justin?
starting to say something?
Justin?
Yep.
On this is where do we indicate those pieces? Like River Lee is one of those sites we really want to have here. Is it put into this area or is it going to be part of a attachment addendum?
Well, as we got to make sure that it's noted in section 2, the inventory, which I do believe it is.
Okay.
All those different potential historical elements are noted in there. So that gives the beginnings support And then you've got the policy portion, which backs up. And then you've got the projects, which says, okay, what are we going to do to actually, implement the policy and implement everything that's in section 2 to actually make it happen. So it's kind of scattered between those 3 sections.
House is backing up what is actually in the document itself. Right.
Right,
Yes.
correct. Yeah.
Uh,
The policies are kind of, if you think about it, Jim, like a comprehensive plan, the policies are kind of like your goals.
Right.
They set the stage for your projects and other implementation efforts. So that's why you have to you want to establish standards and policies that agencies and the town have to that give direction as to how things should be done with respect to whatever the policy focus is. And sometimes that could be that you need a project or a law change to enforce the standard or the policy.
Okay.
So it moves you on to sections 4 and 5.
So
Dave had a quick question. I think he raised his hand.
Dave.
Oh, you're muted there, Dave.
I'm okay now. Can you hear me?
Oh,
Yep.
Okay. You mentioned about projects like the Holiday Inn, the Radisson Inn, if they did
Right.
something, this law is going to kick in. It took the planning board literally 1 year to come up with a checklist of the existing code so that we could give that application to
Yes.
anyone that was coming into town and saying, you got to follow the following checklist and fill in the blanks. Now we can't say, well, you got the checklist and then you got to go look at the WRP thing and then you go look at the waterfront thing. It's going to just make things a mess. So
Well,
whatever you want.
if you're already doing, I mean, Jim indicated you're already doing consistency review, which means that the town must already have a waterfront assessment form of some sort that it's using. And we'll look at that form.
We have
So
nothing like
it's
that.
already happening.
It's not at the planning board level.
It's not. It's in engineering. So we got to look at how.
Well, that was the problem. That was the problem with the whole planning board program is there was the big deal between building and engineering and who does what, who's supposed to do this. And that's when the planning board was so frustrated that we moved forward with the subcommittee to create this checklist that's been working like a charm. And then now you're saying that there's going to be other things done that the planning board doesn't even know about.
Well,
They will. They should know about it if the town's already doing it. If not, they'll have to be educated.
Oh, couldn't you develop a supplemental checklist to cover the coastal zone component?
Well, you have,
Yeah.
we have to adopt the most recent version of a waterfront assessment form. So if Jim indicated that the town engineering right now is doing consistency review, although it doesn't need to because you don't really have an official LWRP, but we'll take a look at the waterfront assessment form or whatever it is they're using and make sure that one, the town either adopts a coastal consistency review law or amends the one that they have so that it's consistent with the most up-to-date version. And two, we'll look at the waterfront assessment form they're using and make sure that that applies. But that waterfront assessment form is in essence a checklist.
Yeah.
And it applies just to the 44 policies.
Mhm.
Yeah, but you mentioned that if someone buys the Holiday or the Radisson, I'm sorry, and then they're going to have to put some type of a bike path or walking path.
Well,
That's
that would be their design to make sure that they're in compliance with policy 22. But if the Radisson is redesigned, if somebody comes in and wants to read about the Radisson property, it's got to go through the planning board. And so when they come in again to get their forms for site plan review and whatever, they're going to be given a waterfront assessment form. And that waterfront assessment form is going to be given to the engineering department. And they're going to have to review the plans and make sure that it complies with all 44 policies, including policy 22. So that it may come out that they give some direction to the planning board that the design has to include a water feature, a waterfront recreation feature.
You're reaching.
Well,
I've
I know,
I've
but
been on the planning board for 4 years and I've been the chairman for 2. You're reaching because that's never gonna work.
okay,
So,
well,
so one of the things
it's-
that might go ahead, Wendy.
You have.
I
to-
mean,
you
you know,
have to be-
I respect what you're saying, but we're not gonna solve it tonight.
I'm not asking.
Whether
you-
they want to, whether
I'm
they
just bringing-
comply with it
I'm
or
just
not,
bringing
you
up
have
the
to have.
point. I'm not asking you to solve it tonight. I'm just bringing you up the
Right.
point. You can
Yeah.
sit here and make a million rules under the sun, but to get them implemented to the
Well,
way.
then
trying
that's a
to bring the
structural
planning board
problem
around and
internal
on
to the
board.
town. Yeah, that's a structural problem internal to the town that
Well, you
the
mentioned earlier that
town
that's
leaders
up to the
have
planning
to
board.
address. We can't fix that.
No,
But
you-
either way, we have to have policy 22.
Well, the policies, actually, Dave, the policies have been in place because the 44 policies aren't a option. They're actually a boilerplate that needs to be required. It is required to actually do an LWRP. The plan of 2006 actually had these policies in place, and they were asking for these things. It doesn't mean that we've been implementing them. It doesn't mean we've had a good way of implementing, because most of the time when the LWRP was even addressed, it was actually addressed from the Corps of Engineers or the DEC, turn around and saying, you're going to do this. We need to know if it fits to the LWRP for the town of Grand Island. And therefore it's more of a reactive thing than a proactive thing. When we're talking about the redesign of the Radisson, that's going to be a proactive thing where Radisson's going to say, we're going to make it into a condominium. At that point, the planning board does have the power in the teeth to turn around and say, you have to have a waterfront feature to this as well. And then that could be part of the.
Refrigerator on top of the mac and cheese.
So it's a tool in the toolbox. It's not a mandatory thing, but it's definitely a tool in the toolbox for the planning board.
Yeah, and one of the things that might come out of this too is the fact that, as I kind of made note on here, is that noting better coordination or process between the planning board, engineering, and others, just to maybe having engineering handle it isn't the best choice. Maybe there's maybe planning board or someone else that handles it. So that's part of, I think, what might come out that'll come out of this too, is in addition to make sure that the consistency form is up to date, the process that is used to follow consistency with the LWRP is by the appropriate board.
Right. And I think right now, and I'm thinking forward as well, that's why I asked the question and said that right now the lead agency is the engineering department. It really belongs under the building department. And the building department now is the lead group with the planning board. And it means that this is where the realignment should occur. And even the engineering department took it as an afterthought issue and never took the proactive activity of it, reactive position on it. So this is just another tool for the planning board for the future,
And it has to be added to the list because there's, the planning board really should be considering the comprehensive plan. And pretty soon they're going to have in their hands an agricultural protection plan, and they're going to have to look at that and consider that. And then they're going to have an LWRP. So it may call for the need that there has to be some educational sessions with planning board members.
Absolutely.
So that they understand what these documents are and how they're supposed to use them as part of their job reviewing proposed development projects.
Mhm.
And if they can't handle that, then you find members that can.
Yeah, because the planning board really is the agency that's looking at how we develop in there. And these are tools within their at their disposal to help them turn around and say, our plans are asking us to do X, Y, Z. So therefore, your plan is trying to do X, and you need to fit within the plans that are forward. You're right. It's an education process that's done, and there's a lot of massaging that needs to be worked out. So,
Okay.
Yeah. So, any more comment on policy 23? You can move on to 24.
24.
Which is
24 is a standard state policy that applies to scenic resources of statewide significance. You don't have any on Grand Island, so policy 24 doesn't apply. But you do have policy 25, which lets you consider natural and man-made resources that are not of statewide significance, but contribute to the overall scenic quality of the waterfront area.
Mhm.
So here, Justin made some notes of things that we want to make sure that we acknowledge, including the state parks and the wildlife management areas, the West Shore Parkway, other wildlife habitats, other local resources that are significant by virtue of being along the river or within the WRA. So, you know, and then he mentions the important bird area of international significance, the National Park Service Heritage Area, wetland of international importance. All of those things that we talked about and highlighted in the inventory, they can be mentioned here because they're all things that have to be considered when anything is proposed within the LWRP area so that it doesn't mess up those things.
Mhm.
You know, so this is all about protecting, restoring, and enhancing the natural and man-made resources that are important to Grand Island. So,
So would this, Wendy, extend into land use activities as well? Kinds of land use activities? For example, one of the things that's starting to pop up is people putting porta-johns between within the coastal zone, right along East
Yeah.
River Road. They already have sanitary sewers and they're putting them in. And we just had one go in a couple doors down here.
private people are putting porta potties
Yeah.
out.
Yes.
Yeah, on the
Yes.
waterfronts. We've got that in several places and it makes the shoreline look awful. And it's, you know, gross.
I can imagine. And why are they doing that?
Because they
Because
have
they're too
homes.
lazy to walk up to their houses.
Yep.
Oh, God, well, then you need local regulations that control that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
For sure.
literally, there's times you can't pass by traffic because they're taking and cleaning out the porta-john and they've got the road clogged with the big truck cleaning it up and traffic's trying to go in both directions and you have to
It-
ease way till they're done.
Mhm.
Wow.
And the other thing that's a problem also in the residential components of the coastal zone is looking at the elevation of buildings. When you're talking about a scenic resource like the Niagara River,
Yeah.
and somebody decides to build some kind of building between East River Road and the shoreline with a roof that's extended so high that you can't see the river anymore, then they've impaired that ability to see that resource.
Yes, and actually, let me just look at policy 25. Policy 25 does get into a lot of, it considers views and things like that. So, yeah, all of that has to be taken into consideration. So, yeah, that's a good point.
Hey, that's
You
got.
know,
So, you know, building elevation and the porta-johns ought to be put in there as examples of things you shouldn't
Yeah.
do.
Yep.
Got two quick questions. Dave, I see you're on there too. I know Martha had a question for us. Let me go Martha first and then we'll go to Dave.
I don't have a question. I just need to bow out of the meeting. I have another engagement. I'm sorry.
Okay,
Right.
Okay, thank you.
no problem. Thanks, Dave.
Thanks for joining.
Okay,
So
Martha.
I was wondering, thanks, Justin. So this would also, because it includes the multi-use trail area from the state parks, any future planning that might occur for the scenic viewing would all fall under this policy then. The state
Yes.
would have to take note of the preservation of the scenic view.
Yes.
My understanding? Okay.
Yep.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yes, it applies to state parks as well as DEC or, you know, any other state or federal agency.
Yeah.
Okay. The next
Just-
policy.
I
is-
have one question.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yep.
That's okay. I don't know if we need to mention we have two conservation easements, Gun Creek and Bush Road. Do they need to be included in here?
Well, Bush Road's not in the coastal zone,
Oh, that's true. Okay.
but
I
the
do-
other one is. The other
I
one
do-
might be.
I do have one now back probably about 7 years when scavenger hunts were incredibly big in the area on East
Oh,
River
the
Road.
geocaching?
Yeah, well, they're back for virtual fundraising, and I know of two agencies that have the ferry that's sunken outside of East River Road on it again, which when scavenger hunts were big, everybody found it, it was on the list.
Hmm.
So they were clogging up roads, they were stopping, they were getting out, right, because they found what they were looking for. But also to include that, I don't know if that's included in our inventory, but also as that ages, and if steel prices were to return to the dollar amounts of yesteryear, you know, should this be mentioned, should that be mentioned at all here of that we should put it on the list of, because you know what happens? I live right across from it. I can see it right outside my window all day long. You know, the kids will jump up on the stack and they'll start jumping off of it. There's a lot of divers that come in there. There's people that tie up to it. So is there anything we need to do here with that?
Justin, I thought we had that on the list.
That's a historic resource, right?
Yeah.
So, I
Well,
mean,
that
those,
would
the
have to, that would go
vessels
back
tend to
under
have a long
policy,
history.
policy 23 then.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would fall under policy 23.
So what does that entail, to Deb's point though? Putting a do not touch this sign on it, or
Well,
leasing it, or?
here's the other problem I can foresee is that when we start talking about, that structure definitely has an impairment to the flow of Gun Creek. And in the eventuality that the time comes where the money's afforded to be able to work with Gun Creek, that may become an obstacle, because what it does is it controls and flows the ebb of the sediment, that not only the land ejection that is out there, but also that I can tell because I can walk out to the end of the dock and there's years, depending on how the water flowed, it literally washes right down 14, 20 feet. Other times it's buried right tight to, you know, however it's laying on its side. So in the event the water were to start flowing differently in order to clean out Gun Creek, I think that it could be, you know, a point that has to be dealt with the town.
Yeah, but it isn't the town. It doesn't belong to the town. It actually
No, it belongs-
control of the Corps of Engineers. So
Right.
that's the
No,
Corps.
it doesn't belong to the Corps of Engineers. It's regulated by the Corps of Engineers, but that doesn't belong to them. They didn't put it there.
No, but it's regulated as a navigable object, right?
Well,
Permit.
if somebody does work on that area, it's regulated because it's in navigable waters, yes. But as to who it is that's actually has the title to be able to do something with it, it's not really clear.
Right.
So just to be clear, it doesn't apply here, right? I mean, we're not protecting, enhancing, restoring structures at this point, or?
Well,
No,
it brings people to the island, right? They're using it as part of the scavenger hunt. I mean, it's, I don't know. I'm just asking, you know.
Well, it sounds like do you want people to stay off of that area or out of that area? Is that
Right,
the point?
and
I don't
that's
follow the point.
probably something, it sounds to me like we're talking more about some kind of project or regulatory control, which doesn't necessarily fall under the policy as much as it would apply when we get to talking and discussion in section 4 in the proposed projects list. And stuff like that.
Okay.
That's what I was kind of thinking too. Yep.
Okay, anything else? So we can move on.
My favorite issue, ag.
Ag.
Policy 26, agriculture, doesn't apply because we don't have any true agricultural activity in the WRA. We do have agriculture in the town, but not in the WRA.
Yeah,
So that
agriculture
takes
is
us-
more on the interior area of the land. And
Right.
if you recall, again, the way that we have the WRA boundaries, it goes, along the state parks at the north and south, and then all along the outer edges, cutting into Whitehaven, cutting into Ferry Village, and then obviously cutting in along some of the creeks. But within the creeks, it's really just kind of, within, I think we said 100 foot within the height from the center line. So there may be some strategic little bits of farmland in there, but it really doesn't go into actual farmlands
Right.
in like a
I
massive
mean,
sense.
and I wouldn't, if there are, you know, Justin, you know how we discovered that there were properties here and there where somebody may be keeping bees in their backyard or this or that. I think this policy applies to large scale commercial farming. You know, that's the type of stuff that the policy is concerned about protecting and conserving. And
Yeah.
now that the town is adopting the agricultural protection plan, I don't think we need to worry so much about one or two individual parcels in the WRA under this policy. And then they have to end up writing full-scale policy for it when the ag plan will address all of them. And far better than the LWRP would.
Wendy,
And
Yep.
Wendy, in the ag plan, then, if there are farmers with creeks on their property, there's some regulations as to,
The
Okay.
ag plan looked extensively at drainage problems, because one of the things that farmers discussed with us in our stakeholders meetings and that are the fact, and we even had stakeholders meetings with representatives from the DEC and the Western New York, I'm sorry, the Buffalo Niagara Waterkeeper and the Army Corps of Engineers. And we talked specifically about the creeks and what the town can and cannot do in terms of clearing vegetation, easements, those types of things, and how we can work with the agencies so that we can try to address some of the flooding and drainage problems. Because, you know, a lot of farmland that used to be productive has now turned into wetlands because it isn't draining properly.
Right.
And it's all interconnected. And really, one of the things, and I was looking at the list of projects, I went back over it and thought that maybe it's appropriate for us to be redundant here and carry over something that we had in the ag plan. When we had that meeting with that Corps and the Riverkeeper, or I'm sorry, Waterkeeper and the DEC, we said, you know, the issue is so complicated that you really need to go up and look at it from a higher level. And that the town really needs to undertake a hydrologic study where they kind of look at the past, the present, and where do we go? Because a lot of changes have been made, whether they were regulatory or whether they were infrastructure, structural things, where you built the I-190 and now it blocks the creeks. And wetlands regulations came into play where you can't clear the creeks anymore and various things. So needing to take an actual comprehensive look at drainage on Grand Island so that you can then identify what are the problems and how do we address them? Because without doing that and without having that kind of solid understanding of what's causing the drainage problems overall, it's really hard to come up with the proper solutions. Or you may come up with a solution and it may not be the right one.
You may make it worse.
yeah,
Right, because you don't have a full understanding of the problems. So we could easily carry that over from the ag plan into this LWRP. I think it would be applicable and appropriate.
Yeah,
So,
and it would be something that, you know, when it comes to the LWRP, it would dovetail into water quality and habitat aspects of it too. So there is some connection between it. And then of course it opens up the town to possibly tapping into Department of State with their funding pool, whenever it opens up, for that study. So, you know,
Yeah.
it's just another avenue to kind of help the whole process of things.
right. Okay, thank you.
yep.
And that's not specific, it says in the state's coastal area, is that state-owned land or talking about anything in New York State? What's the reference to states?
Well, you have to understand, these policies apply. We're taking the state's coastal management program and we're tailoring it for Grand Island. So these policy statements apply statewide, and that's where we can take the policy explanation. I think Justin already explained, these these statements that are in bold type, we can't change them. They're set in stone. But we can, where appropriate, we can write sub-policies that are specific to Grand Island, or we use the policy explanation to make the point that we want to, so that the policies apply locally.
Mhm.
So in this case, the use of states coastal areas, just because the state coastal management program applies statewide.
Yeah, and the other aspect of that too was that the state's coastal area, the state had their own boundary for what they determined to be the waterfront revitalization area,
Yeah.
again, statewide. But because we're localizing it, we took that boundary and said, okay, we're expanding it out to include other certain areas. You know, like we mentioned, we expanded out to along some of the key creeks, some of the other key recreational and natural areas, Ferry Village, Whitehaven, so on and so forth. So we're bringing that boundary a little bit further in, including that within the now what's called the state's coastal area. So we're localizing it and expanding it more here. So that's why this would apply to there.
It doesn't apply land ownership at all.
No, it's not.
No,
It doesn't,
no.
it doesn't deal with land ownership, just with what the waterfront revitalization area. that we
Understood.
have
Thank you.
outlined.
Thanks for clarifying.
Okay, policy 27. Policy 27 and the next few policies are the energy and ice management policies. Policy 27 was recently revised by the Department of State, and it was revised in accordance with some federal regulation changes. So policy 27 is a sticky one, and the state will be, any changes we want to make to this, they may push back hard.
Mhm.
I only know one community where they allowed it to happen, and it was a community in Orleans County, the town of Yates. Yates has been battling with a large industrial wind company that wants to build industrial scale wind turbines, and the town of Yates is adamantly opposed, to the point where they have changed zoning and they have adopted new regulations, and they have done everything that they possibly can to fight this. And so they were horrified with this policy. And they're the only community I know where I think they just push and push and push, where the state attorney, who refused to relent, finally relented and let them change it. But this policy applies to large scale hydro, solar, wind, and other carbon-free solutions for energy generation. Grand Island, the Niagara River, to my knowledge, has not been a location where I think the state had been considering installing any kind of wind energy generation facilities. I mean, you already have the Power Vista and all of the hydropower right around the corner in Niagara Falls. So I don't think that there was anything planned in your specific area. I don't know, do you know of anything, Paul?
Well, the only thing that I know of that's come up through the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission is these floating hydro facilities that utilize the force of the currents to generate power on a localized basis.
Right.
And they had proposed those in the Niagara River, and I don't think they ever went anywhere.
Okay, all right. So I
That's
mean,
that's about the only thing that I've seen.
right.
Mhm.
I would encourage you to go into the full list of the 44 policies and read policy 27. You may not have objection to it. If you do, it's something we should talk about further. But I would suggest at this point that we leave it alone. And unless you have something that that you see in there that you are strongly opposed to. Otherwise, I think policy 27 should stay as is, because otherwise we're going to have to battle with the Department of State and the state attorneys to try to change it. And granted, there is a precedent now because they did let Yates do it, but I would like you to read 27 and 29 for that matter, because 29 is another one that they're pretty set in stone about as well.
Yeah.
Um,
The only thing though that I did do to that, and that I put up here for recommendation, referencing again, Wendy, that discussion that you forwarded on to me from Orleans County,
Right.
where they factored in there, like, okay, well, we understand at least out in Orleans County that there were major bird flyways and so on and so forth.
Yep.
That would obviously impact the siting of energy facilities, mainly wind turbines.
Right. What
portions of
we
it that
could
they-
add here then, Justin,
Yes,
is
which
that you could add language that just said, in the future, should the town or should the state consider installation of facilities in the Grand Island WRA, they must take into consideration all the things that you noted. The fact
Yeah.
that it's an international area of bird, importance, and all of the flyway and all of those things that Yates brought to light.
Mhm.
Say that all of that has to be factored
Yeah.
in any
So-
decision making.
Yeah, so I did put together some text that did have that was in there that was related to that. So if everyone wants to take a look at the existing policy statement as it's written, if you're good with that, let us know. Or if you like to have it with it modified with this text that I have in here, let me know. Or if there's some hybrid between the two of them.
Yeah, it might be a hybrid, but
Yeah.
Yep.
But
Because again, if we're gonna push too far to change this policy, the state's really gonna push back.
yeah,
So
and
it needs to be carefully worded.
yes, and this was taken from the policy explanation that they provided.
That
they were good with.
Yates came up with. Yeah. Okay.
Yes, that DOS said, yep, this works. So, again, to your point, they already set a precedence with it, so there's a chance that this could go through. So take a look, see what you think.
Well, there's some factors here that are different than Yates. We have a Niagara River that's got a Ramsar designation, a whole bunch of characteristics attached to it that enhance the environment and everything else that are not out there at Yates. And because that's just on Lake Ontario. It's just a hunk of Lake Ontario shoreline, but it has a lot of wind and it's a good place to put a wind generating facility. But
yeah,
it's a different situation on Grand Island. There are a whole lot of other external factors that would drive that process. And a lot of those are supported by the state. So it would be the state having to impose their own policies to do this.
Yep. You're right. And I'll tell you something. I think you guys have far more justification to have an issue with this policy than Yates did. Yates Yates sits along the Lake Ontario shoreline. And Yates is a big square town, and the majority of it sits outside of the WRA. WRA is just a slim stretch of land that sits on the north side of Lake Road that parallels the Lake Ontario shoreline. And they had already zoned it waterfront residential, and in the zoning that they adopted that prohibited wind turbines, they weren't allowed to be located in the waterfront residential district, nor was there enough width in that shoreline area between the road and the shoreline to even be able to locate one. So frankly, it never could have happened in their waterfront area to begin with. But they're nuts, they're crazy. They're like lunatic about fighting these wind turbines. So they just beat up the DOS attorney till she just finally said, okay, I give. And she let them change the policy. But you guys truly have an argument to be made because you're this island floating in the middle of the river, and the river around you has all of these important things. So, so actually
we did make note of that in the policy modification, explanation modification, as far as
actually you've convinced me now. So look at it closer, and maybe there are solid grounds for us to say, you know what, we have a stronger case than Yates did.
Mhm.
So let us change this policy to match what you did with Yates and let them tell us no. And then they're going to have to say why. Then we
Yeah.
can push back and say, well, why not? You know,
Yeah.
we have a
Is
stronger
that-
case than Yates did. So
Well,
yes,
is that something that you would put into the documentation as it goes through the process for review?
well, let's write up the policy. Justin has already done a fairly good job here of modeling it with what Yates did, because I
Mhm.
provided him all of the documentation. Let's
then
write
the-
it that way and let's see, you know,
What
I
they come
mean,
back with.
it's a different woman. We're dealing with a different Department of State representative, but it's probably the same attorney. But either way, we can push back and fight for this.
But when you do that, you'll be adding in all of, can you add in all the things like, you know, it's a Niagara River Greenway? It's
Yes.
got a national park component, you know, all those
Yep.
kinds of things that all
Yep.
added to that, very different,
Yes,
you know.
and all the reasons why they need to really consider other areas before they consider Grand Island waterfront. So, yeah,
Absolutely.
so, okay.
Okay.
All right.
On that.
Policy 28. The policy statement is ice management practices shall not interfere with the production of hydroelectric power, damage significant fish and wildlife habitats, or increase shoreline erosion. But this is ice management practices. The problem that you have on Grand Island has to do with the Power
Mhm.
Vista sucking out water so that your water levels go up and
Mm.
down. And that causes the ice. That's different. So this policy explanation is very short. And it just says, prior to undertaking actions required for ice management, an assessment must be made of the potential effects of such actions upon the production of hydroelectric power, fish and wildlife and their habitats, as will be identified in the coastal area maps, flood levels and damage, rates of shoreline erosion damage, and upon natural productive features. Following such an examination, adequate methods of avoidance or mitigation of such potential effects will be utilized if the proposed action is to be implemented. That's what the
So that
existing
gives-
state
That gives
policy.
the town of Grand Island a real good hook to go in and have that stuff analyzed,
Yes, it does.
just the way
It
it
does.
is. I mean,
Yeah,
you know, I don't think doing much more to it is gonna change anything.
right. So, yes,
Yeah.
but it does give you the hook, as you said.
Yeah. The only thing that I added in there was just adding just a general note at the beginning that the town is obviously uniquely impacted by the flow and accumulation of ice in the river. And I made note of the ice boom on Lake Erie.
Yes,
And
that
then the
too.
ice buildup, but then of course noting that ice buildup on the river is not formally managed along the town of Grand Island waterfront because it's not. I mean, there's
Oh,
there's
no,
nothing that's-
you're just ignored.
yeah.
Yes,
Well, there's,
So-
yeah, I mean, there's no resources to do that, you know?
Yeah.
true.
Yeah. So it's at least knowing that within the policy, and so then hopefully that helps with the hook to try to at least engage in
Yeah.
something conversation
that's good.
wise.
Okay,
And then I just made a note as far as, where it mentions in the sentence for, rates of shoreline erosion damage and loss of private property. So just, again, putting note in there that it's not just shoreline erosion, but it's the private property damage or loss
Yep.
thereof.
yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
Okay. Policy 29 is another one of the state's new energy policies.
Mhm.
Yates changed this one, but very minor. And I don't know if I gave it to you, Justin.
Yes, yep.
So, same thing here. Whatever Yates did, we should follow suit and
Yep.
request
Which I
the
made
same
note in there.
policy changes. Yep,
Made note in there as far as, first talking about the open waters of Lake Erie and portions of the Niagara River as far as freshwater fishing, sport fishing, the tourism impact, the marinas, docking facilities, so on and so forth. All of these different aspects within Niagara River are influenced. Again, making note of the corridor for migratory birds, and that also the upper portion of the Niagara River is an artery to the Great Lakes St. Lawrence Seaway, although it's just kind of like a little spur of it. But still, it's kind of included within there with the channel. So again, it's noting that it's part of a larger system. So, renewable energy has to take into consideration that Grand Island is, still has other aspects that influence it that may then turn away the use of renewable energy in this area.
Right.
Yeah, and it's not just the St. Lawrence Seaway. I mean, we need to keep in mind that we are also part of the Erie Canal corridor that runs all the way down to New York City. So
That's true. Yep, that's true.
Yeah.
And
That
the
is-
other,
Yeah, that's a good point. That should be noted as well.
and that's the east channel of the Niagara River all the way up to Tonawanda. So that whole section would be, grossly impacted by any kind of activity that would fall under this category.
Okay, that's a good point. I'll add that one in. Okay. All right. Perfect. So
Okay.
again, take a look, read through that and see if there's anything else that that would apply. The existing policy, if that works, or if the modifications that we have in here, if that makes sense to everybody.
Okay, some of these next policies we should be able to move through pretty quick because they're pretty standard. And we can, in most cases, just use the existing policy explanations.
Mhm.
Policy 30 is pretty standard. Municipal, industrial, and commercial discharge of pollutants, including but not limited to toxic and hazardous substances into coastal waters, will conform with state and national water quality standards. There's not much more we can add to that. It basically says that, anything where there's runoff, leaching, spillages, sludge, or waste disposal or drainage, that these regulated industry discharges have to comply with the regulations, federal and state regulations for waterways. So anything that passes through municipal treatment systems has to be properly treated and such before it can be discharged. So we'll just stick with the
Take it
existing.
as is.
Yes, and for policy 31, state coastal area policies and management objectives of approved waterfront revitalization programs will be considered while reviewing coastal water classifications and while modifying water quality standards. However, those waters already overburdened with contaminants will be recognized as being a development constraint. This identifies the Federal Clean Water Act of 1977. It talks about that. So this policy explanation stands, but Justin added that local waterfront revitalization programs and state coastal management policies shall be factored into the review process for coastal waters in conjunction with local monitoring of water bodies from regional entities such, excuse me, as the Soil and Water Conservation Service and Buffalo Niagara Waterkeeper. So I think that that's an important add.
Yeah, so there's obviously some more local monitoring and programming work that's been in place that we should make sure that's wrapped in as part of it, so that, again, we're not just looking at state and federal oversight, we're also taking a look at more of the detailed level, what have we been doing locally that we can factor into that. So
Yep.
basically shout out to that one. So
I guess the only comment I would make there is that by virtue of the fact that you're naming some organizations that are in that sentence, does that mean it doesn't apply to other organizations that might come about later on? Perhaps you might want to change that to a more generic statement that doesn't identify the specific organizations, but
he does say,
captures what they are.
yeah, he does say such as, so they listing them as examples, but
yeah.
Okay, I see. All right.
Yeah.
I mean, the legal jargon such as but not limited to, could always throw that in there, but at least noting that, there's those entities that have there's already something that's in place now. So, you know, if there's more that come into it, as long as they kind of follow along the same lines as what County Soil and Water and the water keeper's doing, then I think that would fall into place.
Yep.
That's what I was
Okay.
gonna suggest, but not limited to. Yep, thank you.
Yeah.
Done.
Okay.
This is the beauty of technology, I will say, with this whole thing, is that you can make changes on the fly and they're already there.
Yep. Okay, policy 32 just has to do with, it's encourage the use of alternative or innovative sanitary waste systems in small communities where the cost of conventional facilities are unreasonably high given the size of the existing tax base of these communities. This really applies to rural communities that aren't sewered. And the
Yeah.
majority of the LWRA is sewered. So just, you know, we would use the existing state policy explanation, which is one paragraph, very short, but add to it that the majority of lands located in the WRA are serviced by public water and sewer, that unsewered areas where septic systems are still in use shall promote proper maintenance practices to protect water quality, ensure that these systems are functioning effectively. Can't say much more than that.
Nope, I think it's pretty good as is.
So, policy 33, it gets into stormwater runoff and combined sewer overflows. It calls for the use of best management practices to ensure the control of stormwater runoff and combined sewer overflows draining into coastal waters. So we would use the existing policy explanation, but add to that what Justin put here. He added in some information. He's all untreated sanitary waste. Oh, wait, I'm getting ahead of myself. Sorry. He notes that there are no combined sewer overflows in the town and that the town is subject to the municipal separate storm sewer MS4 program to control stormwater pollution. So,
Again, we're making reference to existing regulations or
Yep.
programs that are in place so that, you know, there's
Right.
the connection going back to this.
yeah. Policy 34 is a policy that applies to the discharge of waste materials into coastal waters from vessels subject to state jurisdiction will be limited so as to protect significant fish and wildlife habitats, recreation areas, and water supply areas. So this is about boat waste. And so Justin took the state explanation, but he added in there information where coastal resources or activities require greater protection than afforded by this requirement. The state has designated vessel waste no discharge zones, which include Lake Erie and the Niagara River. And then within these discharge zones, the discharge of all vessel waste, whether treated is or not, is prohibited. And so that you have to use designated waste pump out facilities as necessary. And that there are several locations noted in the Federal Register that exist in the town WRA.
So, you know, what was interesting about this policy explanation was that the way that they had it phrased was, it was more saying that, well, if there is, you know, if there is a potential for there being a no discharge zone, and, you know, there's things to look at in order for something to actually happen, we already know that the Niagara River is already in a discharge zone. So we can take out all the text that says, you know, well, if it applies, look to this, and the program may do this. Well, we already have something. So took out the past tense stuff, put in the stuff that exists now, and again, made note of what's already in place as far as programs go, and that there are that there's stations that are already noted. Whether or not those stations may change in the future, that's why at least I kind of left it gray the way that it's noted, but the latest one that I saw, that it does have it in there. So again, gives more emphasis to what's already in place now.
Right. Yep. Good. Okay. Policy 35 is dredging and filling in coastal waters, and disposal of dredged material will be undertaken in a manner that meets existing state dredging permit requirements and protects significant fish and wildlife habitats, scenic resources, natural protected features, important ag lands, and wetlands.
Mhm.
So what Justin did is he, at the end of the first sentence, he recognized that within the Grand Island WRA, the Tonawanda Channel is dredged by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. The rest of the policy explanation stands as it is. So we're good with this one. Policy 36 has to do with activities related to the shipment and storage of petroleum and other hazardous materials will be conducted in a manner that will prevent or at least minimize spills into coastal waters. All practicable efforts will be undertaken to expedite the cleanup of such discharges, and restrictions for restitution for damages will be required when these spills occur. We can just use, again, the standard state policy language here.
Yep. It pretty much takes care of stuff. Yep.
Yeah, and it really, actually, it refers you down to policy 39. And if you want, we can jump ahead and then go backwards. But policy 39 is very similar. It talks about the transport, storage, treatment, and disposal of solid waste, particularly hazardous waste within coastal areas, will be conducted in such a manner so as to protect groundwater and surface water supplies, fish and wildlife habitats, recreation areas, important ag land, and scenic resources. So the policy, these two are very similar. I don't know why they never rolled them together, but the policy explanation for 39 applies under 36. So we'll just leave it at that.
Yep.
So policy 37 has to do with non-point discharges. So the best management practices will be utilized to minimize non-point discharge of excess nutrients, organics, and eroded soils into coastal waters. We would use the existing policy explanation, which is very short. It says best management practices used to reduce these sources of pollution could include, but are not limited to, encouraging organic farming, pest management practices, soil erosion control practices, and surface drainage control techniques. And
So to
Justin
that,
just notes, he noted for public and private development projects. And he also noted at the end that those techniques, in conjunction with the Western New York Stormwater Coalition and the town of Grand Island's existing MS4 program requirements.
Yep.
So policy 37 is good. Policy 38 does not apply, because it references the quality and quantity of surface water and groundwater supplies will be conserved and protected, particularly where such waters constitute the primary or sole source of water supply. And I think what we need to do on this one, Justin, is you need to just indicate that the water, that the Niagara River is the source of drinking water, and that and I need to look at this one a little closer, because Valeria may require us to say something about protecting groundwater supplies. But the policy itself says surface and groundwater are the principal sources of drinking water in the state, and therefore must be protected. And then it goes on to say, since Long Island's groundwater supply has been designated as a primary source aquifer. But I think we at least need to say something about the fact that surface and groundwater are our principal drinking water sources, and that Grand Island gets its water from the Niagara River. And that something, I've mentioned that Erie County Department of Health regulations for monitoring and protecting the quality of drinking water resources on Grand Island.
But Long Island is a little bit different because a lot of people are using well water there.
Yes.
Well water is
And
not
they have the one sole source aquifer, and the Pine Barrens
I don't know if
lands
you're
out
hearing
in Brookhaven and that.
Yep.
So, yeah.
You can hear you, Paul.
Are you guys
Okay.
hearing me?
Yes.
No?
Yes,
Loud
we
and clear.
hear you, just don't see you. We see your notebook.
Yeah, I don't know. I dropped the phone and I'm all screwed up here. I think I'm going to log off and log back in again. All right.
Okay.
Sure, if you want to, but you don't really need to. Okay.
So
Policy
39 we
40,
covered.
policy
Before-
40 doesn't, policy
I
40
have
doesn't, Yep.
One question back to 39.
yeah.
Do we have any brownfields on Grand Island, and would that apply to this at all?
Mm, you do, and I'm sure that there's brownfield properties in Ferry Village and probably over in Whitehaven area, but it wouldn't apply to this policy.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, policy 40 doesn't apply. It has to do with effluent discharges from major steam, electric generating and industrial facilities. You don't have any in the Grand Island waterfront areas, so we just say that and.
Okay, I'm back. Can you hear me okay now?
Oh,
Yeah.
Paul, we're done. We're ready to say goodnight now. So, no, just kidding. No,
That's
we're
all right.
just
My
noting-
battery needs to be recharged anyway.
We're just noting that policy 40 doesn't apply because it speaks to major steam, electric generating and industrial facilities. And we don't have those things in the WRA. This 41 is just a standard policy. Land use and development in the coastal area will not cause national or state air quality standards to be violated. So we just use the state's policy explanation. The same with policy 42 and policy 43. They're air quality policies and the state's explanations are sufficient. So the last one is policy 44. It's the wetlands policy. And it's to preserve and protect tidal and freshwater wetlands and preserve the benefits derived from these areas. So we would use all of the existing state policy and we would enhance it to talk about the important areas on Grand Island. So Justin is saying that at the end of the policy statement, to indicate that there are a number of areas in the Grand Island WRA that contain state and federal freshwater wetlands. Any proposed activities, including development proposals that may affect these wetlands within, contain, or adjacent to, are subject to the provisions of Article 24 of the Environmental Conservation Law, as well as local regulations pertaining to environmentally sensitive areas to protect these natural features and identify mitigation measures where necessary or applicable. And then he.
All right, you'll be adding some kind of qualifier in there that we don't have tidal wetlands.
Yes, correct.
Okay.
We would start, yes, we actually, that paragraph could start that way. The first paragraph to indicate that while there are no tidal wetlands on Grand Island, there are a number of areas that contain fresh, state and federal freshwater.
Right.
And then,
And so, the noting that the environmentally sensitive areas, since the town doesn't have any local regulations that pertain specifically to freshwater wetlands, you do have within zoning the environmentally the environmental protection overlay, I think it was. So we're making note to that, which obviously that includes more than just the wetlands, but again, throwing it back to there that you at least have something regulation program wise on the books that you can reference back to it within this policy statement. And just noting various measures that can further the protection and restoration of wetlands. Again, doing a shout out to the habitat restoration plans that have been done and are hopefully going to be continuing on, including but not limited to these different agencies: Waterkeeper, DEC, Erie County Soil and Water. And again, just kind of bring up the fact of what the Freshwater Wetlands Act from the state has in there, and just some other kind of best management practices that honestly we pulled from another Lrpc community that we know has worked, so we can put it into there and just for as far as mitigation
Yes.
measures and so on and
Yep.
so forth.
Yep.
And
Good
so
stuff.
just so it's comprehensive to the reader here, or the users on Grand Island or anybody else who's doing projects here, that maybe should add a component in there about the Corps of Engineers and the 404 program, how that applies to there. that also is present along with the state program.
Yeah, Yep, okay.
Well,
That could be like in the, wherever you start talking about the state regulations, you can say, "Mm, by the way, there's also the federal regulations too."
and that's the federal 404, correct?
Yeah, that's the section 404 of the Clean Water Act.
Thank you.
That's the 1977 Clean Water Act. And that regulates the discharge of dredge and fill material into waters of the United States, which include wetlands.
Okay. Okay, can I add that out right?
Okay.
I think it sounds good.
So that
Wow, we
concludes.
finally
our
got out of
walk
this forest. All right.
So that concludes our walk through the 44 policies. And I think that is enough for us to deal with tonight. So
I
I
was,
think,
yeah, I was joking, said, and for the next hour, let's go on to the next item on the agenda. Kidding, before there's an uprising.
right. So yes, everyone can get up and go and use the restroom and then we'll reconvene. No, I think at our next meeting, we can truly wrap up the policy section and then start talking about section 4, proposed projects and land uses. So I think,
That meeting will be next month or 2 months. When will that be?
Oh,
well,
would you-
don't you alternate and do comprehensive planning every,
But if you want, we can actually accelerate the timelines because we lost so many months and actually do it again.
that would be up to you folks.
It's up to me. I just soon keep on trying to finish the LWP to get it out and for review. If the committee
Okay.
wants to do that.
All right, so what we could do then is Justin and I can start putting together the actual draft policy narrative and compiling section 3 with all of the comments and what we've been doing. I would encourage the committee to take again a look at what Justin put together in combination with looking at the 44 policy statement. And if you have any last thoughts on any of this, please let us know as soon as you can, like before the end of the month.
Does it,
Because,
I want to ask the committee, are you okay with us moving forward to the LWRP the following month to move this along? And then if issues come up with the master plan, we'll then interject them during the
Yes.
discussion.
Yes, fine with me.
I'm okay with it.
Are you opposing?
Yes,
Okay,
Yes.
that's what we're gonna do.
Jason, let me call you right back. I'm right in the middle of a meeting. I'll call you right back.
Okay,
Okay.
okay,
Bye-bye.
so again, if you can look over any of this documentation, and if you have any last thoughts or things that you think we should include, any questions, something you wanted clarified, that's not a problem. Just give one of us a call. And we will then pull together a draft of section 3 and get it out to you for your review, so we can wrap it up at the next meeting and move on to getting into the proposed projects. So what that means is you guys were given a list of proposed projects. Review that also so that that you're ready to discuss it at the next meeting.
Yep, and I will take,
Did you guys have any discussion? I called Jim about and talked about that this morning, about those proposed projects that you had on that list.
Yeah.
Did he discuss that with you at all?
no, they had the opportunity. Did they come out of the master plan?
Some of them did. The first 8 or 9 bullets, the top of page 1, it says Grand Island Comprehensive Plan recommendations.
Oh.
So those 3, 6, 7, 8 bullets came out of the master plan.
Right.
The rest of the list was stuff that came out of the brainstorming that we did at the public meeting, as well as discussions that we've had at prior committee meetings.
I'd like to have a meeting with, I'm gonna have a sideline conversation with Paul and the 2 of you. Because I want
Okay,
to. Right?
okay.
have it after this or at another date?
Another date. I'll do it another day or so.
All right. But yeah, so this is kind of the preliminary shot at, you know, taking everything that we've heard and putting it into there. So, you know, again, to Diane's point that she made at the beginning, that she had a lot of good stuff, that a lot of that stuff wouldn't apply to the policy section, but it would apply to this. So, this is kind of, you know, the town's wish list of like, this is the different projects that we want to start to get going. So, as kind of a wish list, you know, take a look at this, and, you know, again, this was just a draft, so expand upon it, modify, edit it, but definitely, yeah, take a look at it so that when we meet next, we can kind of go through this and start to kind of pick it apart, refine it, and so on and so forth.
Okay, that's good.
Okay.
Yeah, I think just the reason we need to talk to you about it is that some of this needs to be expanded slightly, and
Oh,
some of
yeah,
these things
no doubt,
are
no doubt.
technological
just-
nomenclature isn't correct. You
Yeah,
know,
okay. This was just a brain dump,
it's,
basically.
All right.
yeah, I know. I chuckled when I saw the piece that said, do more paddles up sessions on Grand
Well,
Island.
that's what somebody suggested, so, you know,
Yeah.
and that's the
I don't know
idea
who
of this.
suggested that, but they ought to volunteer and help us out, because it's a heck of a lot of work just to do one of those, you know?
I figured I would throw everything at the wall,
Yeah.
and then we would go through it and we would see what sticks.
Yeah.
You know,
And
I know that there's other things in here that probably don't make sense.
And the other aspect of it too, when it comes to the projects, is that, you know, it's a great wish list, but it's not going to be like, hey, we're going to do everything. There's
Right.
going to be projects that are going to be the high priority. We definitely want to go after these ones, and we'll expand upon, get more detail on. Other ones, they're just going to be basically a bullet list like it's shown here, where these are kind of like the secondary minor projects, still important, but we don't have as much detail associated with them. So
Right.
keep that in mind too when you're going through them. What's really the big projects that we want to go after, and what are maybe minor ones too.
Right.
Well,
Yeah.
you know, and there's some history here that you may not be aware of in some of these suggestions that you made here. For
Oh,
example,
sure. Yeah,
I think
that's
there's,
right. Yeah.
there's a reference
that's-
here to a cofferdam here at Buckhorn State Park, and down in the lower reaches of that creek there. There already is a cofferdam there.
Oh.
Yeah.
All right, well, maybe
I
we need
mean,
another.
I don't know where that came from or how that was going, but that there always, we don't call them cofferdams, we call it a water level regulation structure. So
Okay.
basically, the problem with the marsh was it didn't have deep enough standing water. So we put in steel sheet pilings to raise the elevation of the water surface, so that it would keep that area wetter and restrain some of the plants that were clogging up the marsh. And
Okay, good.
it worked fine, and it's there now. So I don't know where that came from, but you know, those are some of the things that we'd be talking about.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, sounds good.
All right, to the whole committee, please look this list over, because this is really a very exciting piece, because it's stuff that can be done, and we want to plant the seeds now is to get them done.
Jim?
Yeah.
I like the fun of the food boats, play on
Yeah.
food trucks.
Yes. Well, no, I think we'll leave it alone. I like having this, you know, you and Justin and I speaking with Paul, and I'm wondering, should we have the meeting with Paul and then revise the list and reissue it, or should we just work with the list as it is?
Well,
What
let's
would
look
you-
at this again, and we'll clear, well, what I'll do is turn around and put more body to some of the comments so that they understood it, especially when we talked about the
All right.
road. Let's really
Well,
put more behind it, so
Okay,
that
then if you can schedule a meeting as soon as possible with Paul, then we can go through it and revise it and then reissue it prior to the
Yeah,
next. meeting.
all right, we'll do
The
that.
intent is not to change the list or do anything else. It's just to make it more explanatory, so that the public understands what it is. And it doesn't, you know, create some kind of notion that something strange is happening, you know?
Right, but I don't want to have things on the list that aren't real.
Yeah.
Or, you know, that
Well, yeah,
that
that's
are
true
already
too.
done or don't need to be done, or, you know, aren't feasible. The list needs
Right.
to be realistic.
So from some of this, I think I'm gonna need to know where you got it from.
I got it from the, well, we'll talk about that.
Yeah, and,
You know,
Okay.
yeah, well, if you can
Yeah.
give me, a sentence or two and tell me where did you come up with the third one on the list, for example?
What I'll do, Paul, I will email you the document that I used to put this list of projects from the public information meeting together, and then you'll see.
Okay, good.
Yeah, okay, because not everything that gets suggested is going to fit here because the public that made the suggestion may not have known that a project had already been completed,
Yeah, it's possible. Okay.
and or that there's some other nuances that have to be added in there to better describe it, So that's all. It's just for clarification purposes, because when this goes to the public review process, you want to make sure that everybody understands what we're proposing here,
yeah,
Okay.
definitely. And eventually when it comes to it, this is the first crack at it. We'll refine it within the committee, and then we'll have, what I think was like point like 3 or 4 on my agenda, was that eventually we're gonna have a public meeting where we're gonna kind of vet these a little more, say to the public, here's what we came up with. Does it sound right? What do you think are the major projects? What are the minor ones? And it kind of gives them a little bit more say to the process too. So
Right.
yeah, that's right.
good to go.
That's fine. That's fine.
Yep. So with that,
Okay.
I'm going to stop the share on my side, and I'm going to give it back to Rhonda so that she can have control of it. So just so everyone knows that, the screen share is going to be going away.
Sounds good.
To figure out how to.
So committee, are you asleep or are you awake?
Asleep.
Yeah. How could you sleep with this exciting discussion?
You can't sleep. There's a video on you.
Yeah,
True.
Ah,
Everybody's being photographed.
Riveting.
Are we now on to, Justin, are you on to your next steps or you just completed that?
I think we just did that.
So as far as next steps go, I'm now that I have my desktop back to myself here. So as far as next steps, I think, Wendy kind of already mentioned it, that the committee take a look at section 3, start to look at section 4. We're going to do some tweaking to section 3 to get that buttoned up more. And at the next meeting then, which would be August, we will give you the final section 3, and then we'll move on to section 4 as far as the projects go. So
Okay, so the next meeting is not gonna be August for you, it's actually gonna be July, right?
yes, that is correct. I'm sitting here reading off it, and why am I rushing myself? It's only June. Yes, you're right.
You got no travel time in front of you.
True.
So
Very true.
Yep.
Does make
Okay.
life a lot easier.
it sure does.
It makes life a little easier. Okay.
Makes
with that,
projects more efficient.
Wendy and Justin, fantastic job.
I think
Especially,
we need to go because poor Joe Macaluso is sitting there in the dark, and I'm getting worried about him.
Go, put a light on you. So, Wendy and Justin, thank you very much. You guys again, fantastic jobs. And in the environment we're living in right now, seeing we're getting something done is amazing. With that, I'm going to try to move on to something a little more heated. That is the looking at a draft of a letter that was sent out, not sent out, a draft that was being drafted or run around for discussion, and it's on the agenda for a review. At that point, and I don't know if who wants to start this conversation. I thought the letter was good. Paul got to take a whack at it and put a little more meat to the opening to make it more relevant to what we're actually trying to accomplish with the letter. And that letter was to at least review the Project Olive in relevance to the comprehensive plan itself.
Jim, did we all receive that letter?
Have you all, it was
I'm
emailed,
not- When was it emailed?
it was emailed out, oh boy. It was emailed out the last time we were gonna have a meeting when it got canceled.
That was the original letter.
That was the
Right.
original.
Right. And was
I
that
think that
changed?
the thing that I wrote hasn't been sent to anybody, I don't think.
No, I haven't. Okay. Martha, are you still online with us?
No,
she had to
should-
go to work.
Oh, she had to go to work. Darn.
Yeah.
We're gonna put her in front of the pile next time because we really need to have her in the middle of it. Because Rhonda, not Rhonda, she worked on the letter and actually sent a draft around, and I sent the draft around just prior to us meeting last time, and basically it could have been the letter that triggered the board to come flying back at me to say, you don't have rights to turn have a meeting, please cancel. And then, so therefore we need to review that letter and get it more online. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to send out the letter that was modified by Paul Lechner as a second version, so that you both everybody got to see the letter and understand what it's all about. And then because the timing is becoming, I think we're almost in timing for when decisions are going to be made by the town board. So we still have some time before this letter or this recommendation or this comment goes to the town board for its review. I mean, it's going to have the public hearing tomorrow. I believe the 11th is going to be the public hearing set for them to actually start the conversation. And then at that public hearing, they're going to be closing. No, public hearing is going to be opened and left open after that meeting tomorrow online. So anybody that's not aware of it, please be aware that there is a public hearing tomorrow night. Rhonda, am I correct on that? Yes,
Right. Is Rhonda there?
Rhonda's there.
Yes, I'm sorry, I was muted. Yes, it is tomorrow night, and the link to the meeting as well as any comments that wanted to be made, the email for that is also on the website.
And
So
what, that's on Project Olive tomorrow? What is that on?
Yes,
Yes.
it's on
all right.
Project Olive, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and
So
Jim,
it's-
it looks like you sent that out May 7th, if it helps.
did. It was May 7th, I sent that out. And then
Yeah.
Paul got a hack at it, which I thought a modification to it. I sent that off to Martha to actually review, and her and I haven't talked about it. But if we could have I tell you what, is it possible that you can look at the letter and give me comment? Because it could be just that you may want to tweak it, or you may just turn around and give me a thumbs up. There's been conversations, correspondence, not conversations, correspondence with June on this issue. So we need to take into consideration the comments that she's making in towards this issue. I don't know if everybody's got the comments from June Crawford.
I got those and I responded with some comments, but I haven't seen the new version of the letter, so.
All right.
Well, you may still not be happy. You may still not be happy with it. So I just took a crack at it, just
You took a crack at it. So
please understand, I won't be offended if you throw it out and want to redo it over again.
I'm sorry, I'm about to lose my power, so I'm gonna
oh my goodness.
say good night. Sorry.
Before you leave though, the next meeting is going to be July 8th. Okay.
Go ahead. No, go ahead. I'll go plug myself in.
Moving. She's on the move. So I don't want to drag this one. I don't want to drag it out. I thought the letter was appropriate in response to how the project fits within the comprehensive plan itself. The letter does not take away the fact that the Transportation Advisory Board is going to make comment and be very specific, and the Traffic Advisory Board is going to be very specific about their comments and so forth. And I encourage, and we should encourage, and we won't have to encourage them, they will do it. They comment on their specific areas of interest and within our town and our town planning. So the Planning Board, the Conservation Board, the Transportation Board, Recreation Board, everybody will will be coming forward with their specific recommendations for what is Olive, if one pro or con, or things that they feel need to be adjusted. But this comment we're looking at is, how does it fit within the comprehensive plan itself as a project? And therefore, that's what the letter has been framed to do. And I believe it's pretty close to being true to what the comp plan is asking for. So with that, please review it. Eric, I think we sent you both copies that you have I think when you weren't part of the last string that you missed out somehow. No, we missed you on the list of emails going out. I think I sent copies to you for you to look at it, look it over. The recommendation you're going to see, the minutes have been finalized by Rhonda and I, and they'll be sent out to you within the next day. In it, there was a recommendation for drafting this letter, and also that it be coordinated between Eric Fievelkorn and Martha. And so therefore they've done their first shot at it, and then we've actually had other people look at it and make another shot at it. So therefore, I'm going to get both out to you to review them. And let's have let's do emails on this issue to resolve before we get to the meeting on July 1. Okay.
So Jim, are you gonna send out a copy to everybody then? And if you said it's gonna be here today, tomorrow, tonight?
I'll send a copy to Rhonda, and Rhonda then can mail it out to you all. That way it's
Sure.
in the chain of things you're going to see from Rhonda. So I'll forward it on to Rhonda, and then Rhonda can send it out to you all.
Jim, can I just clarify, you're sending the last final draft or the 2 letters?
I'm going to send you the final drafted. I'm going to send you, you got one. I'll send both to you.
Okay, and then we'll forward both.
Got it.
Do we have do we have now a time frame that we resolved at the meeting? It's to be clear, we resolved to draft this and to move communication out. And I know there's been everything from a pandemic to everything crazy in between, so I get it. But right now, what are we like? We resolved already to do this. If people have opinions on it, I think that's fantastic, and I respect everyone on this tremendously in their opinions and want to hear those. But we already said we were going to do something. Why are we not moving forward doing it? If the conservation or whatever place they're going to have their chance to comment within their area of specialty, and they should do that vigorously and as how they feel compelled. But we're not recommending the project. We're stating that it either conforms or it doesn't within something we worked for 4 years on. Yes. So like, I'm frustrated to hear people's opinions, and then we're waiting, like 6, 8, 10 weeks. I don't want to come in after everything's done. Let's show some leadership here.
That's a good point.
We got to get moving.
I got a good point on that. And the other issues, the one thing that Paul and I were working on, especially Paul looked at it, is we made sure that the paragraphs in it referring to articles within the master plan were correct. And the first version may have been hooked up to a draft, but the final version had numbers that were off. So we made sure that those things were done correctly. And then the other one was we beefed up why the comprehensive plan and what is the purpose of the project. So to me, I think you're going to find the letter pretty appropriate. But if you feel as a group that we're doing this, and you feel the document is correct, I'm willing to move forward. I mean, you're right. We did vote to draft a letter and then circulate it and then turn around and issue it. So to me, I'm not opposed to doing that, but I want to make sure we have total transparency with the entire committee. That's what I'm pursuing.
I appreciate that. I just don't think any one opinion should stop the process. I mean, the questions were to slam the brakes on offering an opinion versus taking those comments and including them in the opinion potentially. I have tremendous respect for June and Diane's input to this. I mean, tremendous. But at the end of the day, this is not the conservation board. There's a piece of that folds into here like every other committee that we need to include the commentary on. I just don't want it to drag on and become an intended process for feet dragging. Let's either decide we're going to do it or not.
This is only one component of the entire process. We should just go ahead and issue the
Right.
letter, do what we decided to do, because the other organizations have responsibilities that they'll exert as advisory boards. And by the way, we are not the elected officials. We don't make decisions, so we don't have to go prowling around for public sentiment or comment on this, because it's not in our purview to do that. That's the town board's responsibility. So all we're doing is doing just like any other advisory board would do, is just rendering an opinion. It's like when we rendered an opinion on the West River Trail through Parks and Recreation. I mean, some people didn't like that, but the board was unanimous in deciding to go forward with it. And that's what we should do. And that was a piece of the puzzle that the town elected officials had to deal with.
Right.
So I think you're right. It should go forward.
I would agree with Paul and Eric. Let's
Yeah, I
Send
mean,
it-
I agree. I was there and I remember voting for this and I just think when you say opinion, Paul, it's an opinion as to whether or not it fits within the comprehensive plan. It's not opinion of whether or not you like the project. It's
Or it's good or
about
bad.
whether it fits in with
You're
the
exactly
comprehensive
right.
plan that we spent 4 years putting together, all the heads.
Well,
of all the boards.
Well-
I had to laugh. I had to laugh when all of this came up. Like I said, we worked on this plan for 4 years, and the first time we're going to challenge it, we're going to throw it to the side and not use it. You can't do that. We have to go forward with this, whether they like it or not. The results have to be put forward, and they'll consider that in their whole matrix of issues that they're going to look at for this project, right?
Yeah, and I would like,
Correct.
yeah, I'd like to add, and Eric, you're right, but I would turn around and say, you're almost right. I would say that it hasn't been just that project in that area hasn't been just ratified in 2018 after 4 years of work. It was ratified in 1995. It was also ratified in 1996. So you got 1969 first, 1995 next, 1998 third, again in mini review in 2011, and then ratified again in 2018. So this parcel that's been zoned for M1 for what use we're actually applying it for has been there since the initial comprehensive plan of 1969. So we've had over 20 years, 40 years of actually reviewing and in ratification that this area was designated to be what they're asking to do. So to me, the letter that's coming out is justified by the fact we're referring it to the comprehensive plan. It ain't a yay or nay. It's to the fact that the community has ratified this multiple times. Is a lot of definition as to how it's going to be implemented by the other boards. Yes, but this board isn't the final say on that. It's just giving you a confirmation. Here it is in the comprehensive plan, and here are the paragraphs that basically back up what was being asked to use of that property and how it's being applied today by Project Olive. So
So I'm convinced, let's go ahead and send it in.
all right, so please.
We just want to get a final copy though. I mean, I haven't seen the drafts yet, either of them, and I'd love to see Paul's work because his wordsmanship is fantastic. So I'd love to see it though, and just have a quick chomp at it and have an end date that we choose to, like, what's our end target? When are we doing this?
So
What's our deadline to work
maybe
towards?
by Friday, if we can get it tomorrow, we
Ooh.
can all give
Why
these.
don't I work on it tonight to get it to you, so you have it tonight in your mailbox or tomorrow morning. How's that? And then
Okay.
you have until Monday to throw a wrench at it. All right?
I think we may need it. You know, a lot of the commentary to think of, everyone, I think it's important that we're getting feedback at the chamber or through community stakeholders is the idea that, oh, we're sacrificing a ton of designated green space. No, we're not. The plan has
No.
green space. Now there's trees coming down and there's habitat being affected. Absolutely. But those were areas that were designed in the plan long before us and ratified again in this plan to be done so. And just reminding people of that and then letting them decide the consequences after that is up to them. But this is not like we're picking a spot that we designed to stay green and rezoning it all of a sudden. These are points I just think that the public needs to be able to read from the master plan committee, in my opinion. So there's a lot of confusion and there's going to be a lot of talk, and that's a good thing for a project this size, the talk. But let's narrow it from a planning standpoint to what we've worked years on here.
Sounds
Thank
good.
you.
Larry, you got anything to say?
No, I'd like to, you just go ahead with this letter. I read it. I thought it did what you said. It went in compliance with the comprehensive plan, and that's all we're saying.
That's all
The
we're saying.
plan is there.
Right.
It appears to be in compliance.
Good. All right. So the recommendation is, unless I get a whole bunch of you guys coming back at me saying you're going to die if you send this, please review and have it done and be reviewed back to us by Monday.
That's
Jim,
good.
can I clarify? Will you be sending that to me tonight?
You tonight.
Tonight?
Yep.
Okay.
Yes. All right. Our next meeting is going to be July 8th. 6:30, most likely it's going to be another Zoom meeting unless we can figure out how we can get together by then. And we'll be doing we're going to continue with the LWRP. Okay, so that we can get this document wrapped up to be sent off to the state for its review. And then we can get back onto our matrix. If there's anything else, and is there anything discussion you want to do on roundtable?
No, I want to say it's good to see you all. That's for sure. I hope we can get together live next time. Will be my. I need to hug people. I don't know if you're comfortable with that, but I'm coming. So if I see you, watch out. I'm missing.
I'm not comfortable with it.
All right. Well, I'm coming for 2 hugs for you then.
I just love this. If not, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move
I'll
to-
second.
Motion made, second, all in favor?
Aye.
All right. With that, I want to thank you very much for your time tonight.
Take care, everybody.
Good night.
Hi, everybody.
Bye.
Night,
Bye now.
everyone. Good to see y'all.
Bye.